Wario World is the Gamecube debut of Nintendo's anti-hero Wario. It's a platformer where you travel through levels collecting coins and beating up enemies. This was developed by a company called Treasure, a very fitting name since this game is all about collecting treasure. They also designed an awesome GameCube shooter called Ikaruga, which is a lot of fun. Maybe I'll review that some other time. The main character is of course Wario, who was first introduced in Super Mario Land 2 with the 6 golden coins on the Game Boy. Let's remember, Wario is supposed to be a bad guy, so the goal of the game isn't to save the world or a princess or any noble purpose like that. Wario is purely motivated by greed, and I think it's great that they stayed true to his character here. When you begin this game, Wario has a castle full of treasure which he's stolen from innocent people. Unknown to him, however, is that one of the jewels that he's stolen is evil and turns his treasure into monsters that kick him out of his own home. So the goal in Wario World is to defeat all these monsters and reclaim your treasure. I think that's a great plot, and it's nice to see an entire game based around the villain's perspective. The gameplay will remind you of old-school side-scrolling platformers like Super Mario Bros., where it can be beaten in just a few hours. The goal on each stage is to get to the end with a certain amount of red jewels. The amount of jewels that you have to collect varies for each level. At the end of each level is a totem pole type of thing that Wario puts the jewels into, which unlocks the door to the boss area. There's two types of gameplay going on for each level. The regular side-scrolling parts and the puzzles that you have to defeat when you drop down into the trapdoors where you get the jewels. The puzzle areas are the game's best aspect, in my opinion. Just smashing the buttons, beating up enemies can get old, so these puzzles really give the game an injection of substance. A lot of the puzzles are in 3D, where you have to spin the camera around 360 degrees to see it from all angles. Some of these are so easy a goldfish could figure them out, but other ones deliver some real challenge. As one example, in Pecan Sands, the desert level, there's a puzzle that's pretty hard. You punch blocks into other blocks, bouncing them around the room. You have to punch the blocks in a specific order to finally get one close enough so that you can reach the center of the platform with the jewel. It'll take a lot of trial and error and reasoning to figure it out. The normal side-scrolling parts are fairly easy. For me, the only difficult parts came when you had to figure out how to get past a wall blocking your path. The early ones are simple, like just stomping on the wall's hand, but then later these get more complicated to figure out. There's a tree with thorns blocking your path on the beanstalk level. For that one, you punch the tree, making the spiked fruit drop down. Then you have to get them to roll over so they're safe to pick up. Then finally you can use them to throw out the tree. Just little things like that give it a much needed puzzle aspect, instead of it only being a brainless action game. Since this is a platforming beat-em-up, you're going to be jumping over gaps while getting attacked the entire game. If you're knocked off the edge, you're sent down to a pit below where you have to find the spring to bounce back out. This really gets on your nerves after a while because it's not difficult or fun. It just prolongs the game. And you will fall off a lot because of the lack of shadows to guide your jumps. I wish they would have just made it so that if you fall off, they just put you back. I could have done without this whole pit escape thing. The controls are easy to learn and function very naturally. Hitting L activates Wario's hypersuction, which you can use to suck in coins, kinda like Kirby. It's quicker than having to pick them up individually. One of the coolest moves is called the Wild Swing-a-Ding. You can pick up enemies and then spin them around, and then toss them and watch them explode. You also use this move to get some of the circular platforms to elevate off the ground. You'll find that all the moves have a variety of uses. Like the pile driver, for example. Not only do you use it to pick up enemies and smash them into the ground, but you'll also need to do this in order to get into many of the trapdoors. It seems like the developers put a lot of thought into the controls, making sure they actually had a real purpose throughout the game. As for the enemies throughout the stages, it'll seem like there's more than there actually is, because the enemies are put into different costumes or altered to match the level design. As an example, the flying chickens on the circus level are the same things as the pterodactyls on the first level. Come on, Treasure, you're not tricking us. They mostly attack in the same fashion, which becomes redundant, and they're also so easy to kill, fighting really offers little challenge. There are some nice enemy concepts though, like these magnet guys who you can use to throw against metal surfaces and use as platforms to jump up. Once you collect all the crystals, it'll open up a portal to a boss fight. The bosses in the game all have an exploitable spot to attack. Once you find it, all the boss fights are fairly simple, but fun nonetheless. As an example, the red dragons have an easily exploitable weakness. You just punch one of them until the other dragon breathes fire onto its head, causing it damage. Or take the boss fight of the forest as another example. It's a giant lizard with a band-aid across its stomach that kind of reminds me of King Hippo. All you do is throw pillars at him, then pick him up and throw him against the wall. It's incredibly simple. I got to the level 2 boss, which is a sandworm. The first time I fought him, he went under the sand and never came back out. I walked all around for 2 minutes, and he just never came back, so I ended up having to return to the courtyard and did the whole stage over. So it looks like the game does have some bugs. I also noticed that there's some extreme slowdown in certain areas. Later on, there's a boss with a goofy appearance. He's a bull wearing red underwear. You think at first it's like a wrestling match where you just have to beat him up, but that's not how it works at all. The key to this fight is getting him to run near the edge, then have Wario slam the center area with his pile driver, which sends the bull into the lava. It took me a few minutes to figure out the secret to beating him, which is what makes the boss fight so great. They all take a little bit of figuring out. The same goes for the final boss fight against the pirate. At first it seems easy, where you just punch him and slam him into the ground, but then after 3 hits, the game throws you a curveball and you have to alter your attack plan by picking up barrels to hurt him. The graphics are what really saves this game. For the Gamecube, they're really high-end. On the ice level, there's some nice reflection effects, and the first level has impressive light rays coming down, with dust particles even. All the music in the game fits appropriately to the style of the levels that you're playing on. I really like the music, so I want to keep the sound on, but if you pause the game, the pause screen has the most annoying sound effects of some trolls whining. Every time you pause the game, you're gonna hear that. I was okay with it at first, I thought it was kind of funny, but after you're playing this for a few hours, you're gonna want to stab yourself in the ears listening to this horrible noise. As for the other sound effects, I think Wario could have used some more dialogue to say. He has the same few lines the whole game, which get tiresome. I see no reason why they couldn't have recorded a couple more phrases for him. There's a circus level, a snow level, a fire level, just like in 1,000 other games, so there's really nothing too unique going on with the level design that you wouldn't see anywhere else. That said, the levels are huge and there's a ton of stuff to explore on each one of them. The size of these levels alone made the game worth the money. But let's talk about the difficulty. If you die on a level, you get so many coins in the game that there's hardly any chance that you wouldn't be able to continue. I never felt in danger of dying at any time because I always had a ton of money. When you do continue, it starts you exactly where you left off, so you don't even have to restart from the beginning of the level. This is certainly not an NES-era game, which were merciless. To top it off, there's also pieces of a Wario statue that you can collect on each level. If you find all the pieces to complete the statue, you'll get a half heart which increases your life meter. So there's really no chance in hell that you won't be able to beat this as long as you just keep playing. They give you every opportunity. See, back in the NES days, games were harder. They would have sent you back to the start of the stage, or sometimes even back to the beginning of the game. You had to play the games over and over until you knew the levels like the back of your hand and mastered the controls. Here, they just give you everything on a silver platter. So there's no need to get good at it. Just keep playing it and you'll win. That's really awful because you don't learn the importance of failure. With NES games, you'd fail and you'd fail again, but eventually you'd overcome whatever obstacles they threw at you, and you'd get a huge sense of accomplishment. There's none of that here. The game might as well be giving you a blowjob and feeding you grapes while they're at it. Wario World really needed a difficulty setting of easy, medium, and hard or something. But I guess what you can do is just not collect the heart pieces. At least that'll make it harder. The only real form of challenge this game offers is the puzzle areas when you drop down the trapdoors. Some of those actually take some skill and thought to complete, and that's what saves the gameplay experience. So while I do have some gripes, it's still a good game. I'd say that the main game is really only worth playing through just once, but there is some replay value, however, and that's because of all the collection items. There's treasure buttons and pads on each level. You have to stomp on a button which makes a chest appear. If you get all of those, you can unlock a sample of the game WarioWare for the Game Boy Advance. I always thought that the best reward a game can give you is another game. I hate when games just reward you with a change of clothes, because clothes don't really do anything. You want your reward to be something fun. Not only that, but WarioWare is a good game, so it's worth the extra effort to find the chest. That is, if you own a Game Boy Advance and the connection cables required. Really, you'd just be better off buying the game, but hell, it's more of a reward than a lot of games offered. Nintendo also released WarioWare for the Gamecube a while later, which basically was just a rehash of the Game Boy Advance game, except that the Gamecube version could be played multiplayer. If you want a Wario game though, I'm more a fan of Wario Land on the Game Boy, so go for that. I do think that this is a very underappreciated, overlooked game. It does have a few flaws, which I explained, but overall it's really fun. It is the kind of game that was just good to rent for a weekend and defeat when it came out, but at this point I'd say if you can find it cheap, it's worth picking up. I do think that Wario World was a great concept, and Nintendo really should have went further with it because it had the potential of becoming an awesome franchise. So, what say you, Nintendo? Wario World for the Wii U?